Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. Thank you all for tuning into the show today. We have a great show lined up. Kind of a mixed bag, but both hours are going to be excellent. In the first hour, we're going to be speaking to Barry Weinhold about, are you a 21st century man? And in the second hour, we're going to have the infamous or famous Eric von Däniken talking about all things ancient and alien. So I'm very excited about that. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healing, and psychic readings. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading our free 50-page guide. If you haven't already gotten a copy of Icon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients, it's available for you on Amazon Digital Downloads, only $1.99, along with all of my other books, which you can get through the Just Energy Radio page. So it's just a click away for all of you. Let me tell you a little bit about Barry. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation we're going to have. So men, I hope you're prepared. Barry Weinhold is Professor Emeritus at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs. He was the founder of the Master's Counseling and Human Services program at UCCS. He has also been a licensed psychologist in private practice for 38 years. He specializes in working with adult male clients. Currently, Barry serves as the co-director of the Colorado Institute of Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership, a 501c3 educational nonprofit organization in Colorado Springs. So please welcome the author of The Male Mother, Barry Weinhold. Hey, Barry, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Rita. Good to talk with you this morning.
Well, and it's great having you back on the show, but I have to ask you, we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to put this in quotes, the male mother.
Right.
I can just feel my male audience members going, their skin going, huh?
What?
What? So talk to me about it. What do you mean by the male mother?
Well, the term actually was initially came from Robert Bly and his book Iron John back in I think it was early 90s. He wrote about this. He didn't write a lot about it, but he talked about how men in our culture didn't really get initiated very well, and they go into adulthood without good role models about what it's like to be a man. And so he suggested that they need mentors in the form of male mothers, older men who could mentor younger men. Well, I kind of liked that idea, but I thought, gee, I've worked with fathers for many years, and I think that fathers, it's not rocket science, but if fathers had the skills, they could do what Bly suggested that older men had to do for younger men who didn't have that when they were growing up from their fathers. So I set about writing a book for fathers to help them understand what they could do for their kids to give them the solid foundation they needed so they wouldn't need a mentor later to help them navigate adult life.
Well, when you look at men, because you're looking at obviously the byproduct of a child, what are you noticing that is, I'm going to say, perhaps deficient in them because they're not having this male model growing up?
Well, it's the fact that the models they do have are pretty unbalanced. We have a lot of models of what it's like to be a man, and they no longer fit. I think your lead in about the men of the 21st century, they want a different kind of model for what it's like to be a man in this world. And it's clearly unbalanced in the form of too much masculinity. Now, in our culture, we have kind of avoided and actually condemned men who have developed their feminine side. And so they are really very overbalanced in the masculine area. And I think that's been the cause of a lot of our problems. And men are still the leaders in most of the institutions in the world. And I don't think they've done a very good job, in my opinion. I mean,
Sorry, guys.
We have more wars and more conflicts than we've ever had before, it seems. And I think we need a new model. And that's what the male mother is. And in my book, I talk about how men, men, when they have a child, I mean, they see their wife going through this enormous pain to give birth. And they are so, and if they're really devoted fathers, they're right there with their spouse or their partner giving, well, that woman's giving birth. And then after the birth is finished, they don't know what their role should be. And they also feel pretty kind of insignificant after they see what their wife or their partner went through to give birth. And so they kind of feel disenfranchised in a way. They want to help, they don't know what to do. And so eventually they just sort of give up and go back to work.
But isn't that the expectation in our society, is that the husband, the father, the man is the person that is the primary breadwinner of the family, and that's kind of his contribution to the family dynamic?
That was the model, and the new model is emerging. Young fathers often are opting to stay home with their children and have their wife work. And this is a new model that we've not had before. And so they, or if they can't do that, they want to be involved as equals in the raising of their children. And I saw that one example that happened this last summer that was very interesting. Daniel Murphy, the second baseman for the New York Mets, took time off in mid-season to be there at the birth of his child and to stay there. And I think he took a week or two off. Well, the sports writers just creamed him. What is he doing? Why is he taking time off in the middle of the season to be there at the birth of his child? Why is that so significant to him? And they said, one of them even suggested, well, why didn't they just have a C-section and get it over quickly so he could get back to work? Well, that caught the national media, and there are a number of newscasters, including Chris Hayes on All In with Chris Hayes on MSNBC, brought Daniel on, and he had a long discussion with Daniel about the importance of fathers being there at the birth of their child. And interestingly, every time after that, during the baseball season, I watched this, when a baseball player's wife gave birth to their baby, he took time off, and nobody said anything. So the barrier has been broken at that level. And I think that's an important kind of model that younger men need. Even in companies where they give paternity leave for fathers to take time off to be home with their children early on, most men don't take it.
Or they take one day.
Take one day, yeah. So it's a new emerging model, and I'm excited that the Male Mother book gives fathers not only the skills they need, but also helps show them how important it is to be there. And I talk about 4 initiations that fathers with male mother skills have to perform to give their children the kind of foundation they need to lead effective lives as adults. I can talk a lot about that. So you want me to talk?
Well, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting your comment about that men are trying to create equality in the rearing of their children, where women have been trying to create equality outside the home. It sounds like men are trying to create equality inside the home.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it, because that's exactly what I see happening more and more. And I want to be able to support men. I mean, I work with men and fathers in my private practice as a psychologist, and I've talked to a lot of men about their role as a father. And I've yet to meet one father who said, I was well prepared for the job of a father. Not one. Now,
but I don't think women are prepared for the job either if they're a first-time mom.
Probably that's true, but even so, there's no real attempt to prepare fathers. And this book is really an attempt to give fathers the skills they need to do the job that I think needs to be done. I think really, I look at this, I'm a kind of a visionary, so I look at things I look at the big picture. I think this is where we're stuck as the human race. I think that men and women they haven't really developed fully the various aspects of who they are. And the women have developed maybe their feminine side, the men have developed their masculine side, but I'm talking about men and women developing both sides. And this is a Jungian model. Carl Jung talked a lot about this. And he said that really people can't achieve full maturity until they've done this. Joseph Campbell wrote about this in his book a long time ago called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and he talked about the transformational journey. And he says at one point in the journey of transformation, you reach what he called the hieros gamos, which is the inner union of the masculine and the feminine, the marriage of the two parts. And when people arrive at that level, then they are fully equipped to handle whatever's happening in their lives much more effectively. And I think that's going to be what is going to spur evolution of the human race, is when more and more people have that kind of balance between the masculine and feminine and have it well integrated.
But it also sounds like if there is the opportunity to balance the masculine feminine, I mean, I think there are men who are manly men. Absolutely. And, that's who they are. And there are men that are more emotional or empathic and have more of a feminine side to them. Not that they're feminine, but a feminine side.
Absolutely.
And it would give them permission to be that way. And they don't have to be this macho man if that's not who they are. And the same with women.
That's true. I think there are a lot of women who operate on their male polarity. They in order to make it in the world of work, they have adopted the masculine kind of archetype, and they think that's what they need to do in order to be successful. Well, they need the feminine side too, because we need women in the workplace and the boardrooms that can help make the decisions that really are decisions that, as the natives said, that affect the next 7 generations, or as they call it, the 7 generations yet unborn. And that's the kind of decision making that only people who have integrated their masculine and feminine can make.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I in listening to you talk, I have 3 brothers, but I come from a very large family, and I feel like they were, I'm going to say, fairly well prepared, because all of my brothers have younger sisters that they had to take care of at some point in time, change diapers, do all of that kind of stuff, where in a lot of families, that's a girl job, and not something a boy would do. Yeah. And my mom was an equal opportunity employer of anybody that was standing around.
Yeah. Well, I had a few of those, like I don't do windows. When I was growing up, that was one of them I used to say, I don't do windows. And of course, I was the oldest of three children, so I was there. Actually, my brother is 12 years younger than I am, so I was there to help raise him from an infant on up, and I was sort of almost like a second parent as I was. And when I left for colleges at 18, he was only like 6 at that time. He had a complete breakdown. He just fell apart because his anchor, who I didn't realize how much of an anchor I was, I left. And he recovered, obviously, but it was a very hard on him, and a surprise to everybody. No one thought that my leaving would have such a huge effect on my brother, but it did.
Well, it sounds like you guys had a pretty close bond.
We did, yeah.
Why do you think traditional roles are changing?
Well, that's an interesting question. I just think that I'm an optimist, so I look at it positively. I think people are getting awake more and aware of the limitations they have, and they're trying to do something about it. They kind of know there's a better way. They kind of know there's some way they can do this in a much easier way, and so they're really looking for the resources to help them improve.
Do you think it's also, I mean, in the last, right, I'm going to say 50 years, 40 years, there has been the obvious increase of women in the workforce and taking on more professional roles, etc.
Right.
What impact does that have on the changing dynamic of the male role in society?
Well, hopefully it has had a positive effect, and obviously some men have trouble with that because their own lack of self-esteem or a lack of development of their fullness, and they are threatened by women who come to the workplace and actually can do things better than they can.
Yeah, I got stories, Barry. I got stories.
Oh, I'll bet.
Yeah.
So that is an issue that I think is part of the transition we're in right now. That will smooth out eventually, as more and more people hopefully do develop both the sides of their personality, the feminine and the masculine, and they integrate those. So when they come together, there's no threat. In fact, it's seen as oh, there's more of you now that can help in this situation. We need everybody to be involved, and everybody has to take part in this transition we're in.
And just as a disclaimer, if men embrace their feminine side, it's not going to make them be weak, or it's not going to make them be gay, or anything like that, right?
No. It's really add on. It's a value added piece, and it enables them to be more effective in whatever they're doing, not only as a father, but as a teacher or whatever, as a doctor, a lawyer, a corporate executive, whatever they're doing, it helps them do a better job.
Is it possible to kind of give an example or kind of lay a scenario down of a man who has embraced this part of himself so that people can kind of get a feel for what that would look like?
Well, I think, yeah, there are a number of what I call male mother skills that fathers need to learn. First of them is really to develop genuine empathy toward their children, particularly when their children are experiencing some deep feelings. Fathers aren't so good at feelings, because they've never been taught how to do that. So with some instruction, they can learn how to relate to people who are in some kind of deep feeling state. Maybe they fell down and got hurt, and they're crying, and they need some comfort. Well, fathers often say, well, here, go to your mother. She'll help you. Well, that has to change, and I think it can change with fathers learning a few skills on how to deal with people and have some empathy for them when they're in some distress. They have to also show compassion towards their children. Actually, even when their children might oppose their requests in some way, to understand why that child might have a different way of looking at things. They have to also be able to look at their children as doing the best they can and forgive them when they fail and not get overly judgmental about them. They have to learn how to give emotional support, mirroring, and what I call unconditional love. Too often parents give what I call conditional love to their children. I'll love you as long as you get good grades. I love you as long as you, sometimes it's fulfill the dreams I never was able to fill. So it becomes fairly conditional. So learning how to do that, give that love unconditionally. I think, I remember with my son, there was something he had done that he thought was going to displease me. And I said to him, you know, there's nothing you can ever do or say that will cause me to stop loving you. I will love you regardless. And I'm glad I said that to him, because it gave him a sense of security and safety, that there wasn't anything he could do to destroy the love that I was giving to him. And I think that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about.
You might kick his ass, but
Yeah,
you'd still love him.
Absolutely. I can not like what he did, but I can still love him.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I think another thing that I think male mother fathers could do is they could help create a lifestyle and model a lifestyle of life-giving rather than life-taking.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that traditionally men have been put in the role of life-takers. Women have been put in the role of life-givers. Obviously, they are life-givers. And in many cases, men have been called to go to war, and they've been life-takers. So these are two stereotypes, obviously. It doesn't fit in every situation. But I think that men who develop that feminine side have more life-giving kinds of qualities. And their children pick up on those, and they can model that for their children. And I think this helps them grow up having respect for other human beings, maybe even plants and animals and all the creatures that on our planet that are somewhat dependent or vulnerable, that they don't have to feel like they have to be aggressive toward them. They can be much more compassionate, understanding, and supportive. I also believe that it's important that, and Carl Jung said this, that there's a wisdom of the heart that the mind never understands, never will understand. So I think this intuition that maybe women have sometimes had better opportunities to develop, I think men could develop just as well. And so developing the wisdom of the heart and having intuition on their side and as another tool, another skill, will help them in every situation in their life, not only just as a father.
Well, and it sounds like the things that you're talking about, you know, obviously it can be applied to a child, but also can be applied to every single person on the planet in every relationship that you have.
Absolutely, yes.
You know, so, I mean, I feel like it would help the individual develop as a person.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's the whole goal is, I think if we had two committed parents working together cooperatively to raise a child, what a difference that would make in the ultimate life of that child. I mean, you're creating a foundation for the child. And if there are holes in that foundation, they're going to fall in them. They're going to fall in those holes as an adult. So if you begin to create that from the very beginning, and that's what the 4 initiations that I put in the book are all about, to help create that foundation.
And I'm just going to ask this question, and I'd like your opinion. It seems to me that there is a number of parents, you know, and I don't know if I should just throw it on women or parents or whatever, that have children just because they think that's what they're supposed to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so how does all of this fit into that dynamic?
Well, I think that children deserve to be planned and wanted. And so, and for the right reasons. And I think that a child with 2 parents who have kind of thought through why they want to have a child. They do the planning they need to do. They want the child, and they then are ready to, they prepare themselves to bring that child into the world. That's the kind of beginning that children need.
Okay. Which brings us kind of to another topic. It seems today that in many families are affected by divorce, and with that, it's the mother who raises the children. And I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, and so I'm going to start with this. Are there any negative effects about not having the father involved in the child's life?
Oh, God, yes. I mean, the research is very clear, and my own clinical research just shows the enormous problems that people have when they don't have, either they don't have a father who's physically present, or they have a father who's not emotionally present, who's distant and distracted and tired. And I know my father, when he came home, he worked like 2 or 3 jobs, and he'd come home. My only memories of him for the first maybe 6 or 8 years were him lying on the couch between one job or the other, resting, so he could go back to the other job. So I never did get a chance to really have much relationship with him until much later when I was a teenager.
But what kind of impact does that have on the child? And maybe not during their childhood, but, even later in life when they become adults and parents.
Well, children model after the behavior they see in their parents. So in my case, I think I became a workaholic, like my father was, because that was the model I had of work hard and tire yourself out and do everything you can to provide for your family, but don't take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Oops.
Whoops, forgot that one, huh?
But in those type of situations, obviously, if there is like a joint custody or visitation of the father, can you still create that balance that you're talking about, even if the parents aren't together full time?
It's harder, but yes, you can. And you have opportunities regardless to provide that foundation if you're really committed to co-parenting. And many parents, even after they've divorced, are still committed to co-parenting.
Do you have any tips for those dads? Because I think for a lot of them, they feel kind of like a third wheel, fifth wheel. They're just like this guy that the kids have to go visit.
Well, that's why, again, the book shows the importance of what the role of the father is in the lives of their children. And I think that's an important thing for fathers to understand, that they do have an important role. Even if they're divorced and they're only seeing the kids on every other weekend, they still have an important role in the development of those child and helping to create the foundation for them so that they can have a successful life. And so it's interesting too. The other thing, advice I'd have to fathers is, give up your guilt about not being perfect at this job. Nobody's perfect. Women aren't perfect at being mothers, and fathers aren't perfect at being fathers. And if you don't give up your guilt and shame, your children are going to end up with more of a relationship to your guilt and shame than they do to you.
And in what we're talking about, are we talking about this is the dynamic because you want to empower your sons, or are we talking equal opportunity, your sons and daughters?
Absolutely. It applies to both daughters and sons. And in the book, I talk about that. It's not just raising your sons, it's raising all your children to be effective in the world and to help create the foundation for them so that they can do that.
And if the dad's not around, is it a good idea to find some kind of a male role model, or, have a male energy to kind of step in to take that role?
Oh, I think that's certainly happening. In fact, more and more grandparents are ending up raising their grandkids than ever before. And a good grandmother and grandfather can often have better help, or better, they can do a better job because they're not kind of tied in as much as parents are to all of the things that help or actually prevent parents from being as effective as they could be. So grandparents raising their kids often are a model that where the grandfather who's had many years of experience in life can take the child out into the world and show them more about how the world works. And that's one of the four initiations that I talk about in the book, that the fathers or grandfathers have to be the ones that take their sons and daughters out into the world and show them how the world works and help them gain mastery over first their everyday environment, but then the world around them, outside the family, outside the home.
Well, I know, like with my grandparents, we minded them. My parents, sort of, in a different kind of way. It was in we're gonna get in trouble. But with my grandparents, it was like they asked you to do something. It was like, okay, Grandma, and you just go do it.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be happening with many people. I've heard many stories about that. That Grandpa and Grandma seem to have a better grasp on what needs to be done, and also they're sort of more experienced because there's a learning curve for young parents, and the grandparents now have had the years of experience, so they know what battles to fight and which ones not to, and they don't get into power struggles with their grandkids as parents often do. So it's a much, I think it can be a very healthy situation.
Good. Do you have any general rules or tips for fathers that they can use to practice their male mothering skills?
Well, in the book, I have various kinds of practice exercises for the reader to practice their empathy skills. I give them a couple of little quizzes about, here's what's happening. What do you think the person that's described here is feeling? Tune into the feelings if you can. And so I kind of think that it's a skill that you have to learn. And so if you have some practice at it, and that's the main thing I'm asking people to do, just to practice. And as you practice, you'll get better at these skills. As any skills, new skills that you learn, it's first going to feel awkward and difficult, but eventually you'll see the results and you'll begin to say, yeah, I did it. I was able to really be there for my son or daughter when they needed me.
Well, and it seems like the tools that you are providing, even though the book is called The Male Mother, many women could utilize very similar skills to become a more conscious parent, I guess would be the correct way to say it.
Yeah, I actually have a whole chapter in the book about the male mother in women, how that has to also be part of the team. Since both of them are working together, then they both have to have these male mother skills and learn how to feed off each other and trade off. So if one day I don't feel very warm and nurturing, maybe you do.
Is it important in the dynamic between the parents that they have a platform or an agreement to, this is how we are going to raise our children, with some general guidelines, and between the two of them so that they can provide consistency to their children?
Absolutely. And I think the main job is to create a cooperative agreement rather than a competitive agreement. Most families and most parents end up competing with each other for the favors of their children. And so if you have a more cooperative agreement that you're not going to buy into that kind of behavior and you're not going to promote it, I think you're far ahead of the game.
Well, and I think the kids figure out,
who to go to.
It's like, well, if I go to Dad, he's going to let me do it, where Mom's going to be like, you're crazy.
Well, that does promote a kind of a two against one attitude, and we discourage that. And So if Bobby comes to me and says, I'd like to do this, and I'd say, well, that may be a good idea. Let me talk to your mother and I'll get back to you. So you work as a team. As long as you can keep your kids from doing a divide and conquer, you'll be able to do that more effectively.
Having that consistency in the bringing up of children, does that help the child? I'll just put a period there.
Oh yeah, it's invaluable. Consistency is really an important characteristic, because these behaviors, these attitudes, these feelings that the child grows up with grow out of a consistent kind of pattern that's modeled for them and is expected of them. And so as long as that consistency is there, they will not get confused and will be able to follow that model.
It seems like I'm going to say this generation, whatever, that there is a lot of, I'm going to say spare the rod, spoil the child, but there's not a lot of discipline or expectations from parents. What's your thought on that whole concept as far as what we're talking about now?
That's absolutely the worst thing you can do, is not give any limits or do no discipline at all, because children need limits, and they will act out if they don't have them to try to get the limits. So sometimes when you have an acting out teenager, it's not the teenager's problem, it's the fact that the parents have not set effective limits, and the teenager's acting out to find out where the limits are.
So I will do this to see if I can get away with it, and if I can get away with it, I'll just keep doing it.
That's one of the things that happens, frequently. But then, interestingly, and I've studied this and others have studied this, that children who grew up in families where they had very permissive parenting, they almost all end up feeling that they weren't loved by their parents.
Interesting.
Yeah. So parents sometimes think, well, if I discipline them, they're not going to think I love them. Well, that's not true. When you discipline your children, you're showing them that you care about their behavior, and that you love them enough to intervene and make sure that they're safe and that they learn how to grow up effectively. And if you don't set any limits and you don't discipline them, they kind of think you don't care.
Well, and I think it makes them be more rounded in general. One of the things that I see, because I work with, I have a lot of female clients, and then we end up talking about their teenage or young adult children, that there's this rash of depression that they're experiencing, the child, because they get out of high school or they're a senior in high school or whatever, and now there are these expectations that they do something.
Absolutely, and many of them don't feel prepared for what they now see that they're going to have to do. And there's also been a rash of teenage suicides. I don't know if that's national, but locally it's an epidemic.
Really?
Yeah, and people are scratching their head. Why are all these 16, 17, 18-year-olds killing themselves? And so there's some people now looking into that and seeing if we can find some answers to that question.
Well, I mean, I just see that, there's not even responsibility placed on the child to go and do stuff. You tell them to clean their room and then they don't do it, and you're like, and then there's no consequence for it.
That's right. Right. Well, there's a lot of good parenting programs out there for parents who have trouble setting those limits. There's Love and Logic is one of them that I know of, where they talk about natural and logical consequences. So if a child doesn't clean their room, what would be the logical, natural consequence that would help them remember to clean their room? And I often encourage parents to involve their children in setting those consequences. Like, what would help you remember to clean your room? What would have to happen to help you remember that? And then they have to come up with the consequence. Well, if I don't remember it, if I didn't get to go to the movies, or I didn't get to go out with my friends, that would probably help me remember. Okay, that's a consequence then we'll use. So you engage the children in that process. Don't just arbitrarily assign a consequence that may have no meaning for them.
Well, and it sounds like with that format, they made the consequence, and so they have to live by their own rule.
Exactly. That's how it works.
Oh no, I broke my own rule.
Right. Yeah.
All right, going back to the male mother.
Yeah.
Let's talk biology for a second. From a biological point of view, does taking on this role, as the male mother, change chemistry in fathers?
Absolutely. It also helps develop a part of the brain that can, in many people, be underdeveloped, and that's the prefrontal cortex. We know that the prefrontal cortex houses a lot of these male mother type behaviors and skills. And if you haven't developed those, your prefrontal cortex in your brain is not developed. So you're leaving out a big part of the resources that you need to be effective in the world. And so the chemistry and the biology is there, and the research has been very clear that people who develop these skills have a much more fully developed prefrontal cortex in their brain.
Well, and what is the prefrontal cortex responsible for?
Well, it also it helps us make decisions. It's almost like it has an executive function of it. It also helps us use our intuition as a tool. When we don't quite know what to do, we kind of tune into our own intuitive feelings about what might be the best choice here. It also helps us develop empathy and compassion, and learn how to really use our feelings more effectively in our life. So those are all things that come out of the prefrontal cortex.
Well, I guess women must have giant prefrontal cortexes.
Interesting you would say that, because the research confirms that. Women have much more fully developed prefrontal cortexes than men.
Haha, my prefrontal cortex is bigger than yours.
Right. Well, I guess if you want to be competitive about it, you can do that. But the other side would be, okay, I've worked on these things. How can I help you work on these things too? I've learned how to do this because society has said it's okay for me to learn how to do this. So how can I help you learn how to be a partner, an equal partner in parenting our children? And, I think, if men are open to that, women can teach them a lot about how to do that. Although men do nurture differently than women. And that's
Explain.
Well, women tend to, in their nurturing, they tend to be much more enveloping and kind of, oh, here, come, let me hold you and comfort you. Men are different about that. They tend to nurture by saying, well, I can see, if they're doing it well, I can see this is hard for you and you're having a hard time with this. So how can I help you? What can we do together here to help you feel better? So they come at it a little differently than women do. And I think having both of those operating in a family, I think, is very healthy.
Have you worked with any men who have, that seem like manly men who have taken the opportunity to nurture and, become a male mother, and changes within them, within their personality yourself?
Absolutely. And all of the things I write about, I have worked on and developed in myself. So I'm a model for men who come to me and want to know how to do it. I can tell them how to do it. I can also show them how to do it.
But I'm just kind of looking for an example. I just, I have that curiosity factor. So what kind of things change? I mean, because there are a lot of men who, that's my wife's job. The children are my wife's job. I mean, have you seen them make the transition from not taking any responsibility to actually stepping into the role of parenting? And what was your observation as far as the personality change?
Oh, yes. The answer is I'm seeing many, many more young men, millennials, who are now saying, I want to be an equal partner and I want to learn how to do this. And it's enlivened them. They're much more alive and passionate about life and about what they're doing. I just, and actually it sometimes isn't just younger men. I'm in a men's group, and one of my men in the men's group just became a grandfather. And he is so passionate about this child. His daughter sends him pictures every day of this baby. And he comes to the men's group and he shows us the latest pictures every week. And he's so excited about it. And he says, I want to be in this child's life as much as I possibly can. And he said, it's my number one priority in life right now. I mean, that's a shift.
Mm-hmm. But that's really great. I mean, because there really hasn't been permission for men to do that, or, just because of social stereotypes. I mean, speaking of that, we're talking about social stereotypes. What other kind of obstacles do men face in trying to make this transition?
Well, it does take some courage to face the fact that many people will not support you. They may be outwardly critical, or they may be kind of silently critical, and you'll notice that they have some judgments about the fact that you're doing some things. I mean, that's true. That's why men don't take their paid paternity leave, because they're afraid that there's going to be some judgment among their coworkers if they do that. So I think I think the people the young men that are doing this are the pioneers. And obviously the pioneers are going to have some arrows in their back, so to speak. People are not going to accept this, and they're going to have some things that they're going to have to work on. I have some things in the book about that, about how men can handle that. Because I think it is a reality that we're in this transition between the overemphasis and the unbalanced male and masculine characteristics to where men are beginning to learn how to develop their feminine characteristics. And then the third stage, of course, would be to put the two together, which is a whole nother, maybe that's another book, I don't know.
Integration. We're going to talk integration.
Yes.
Any other kinds of obstacles? Even from a legal, I think the Family Care Act was a wonderful benefit to men, women, and families in general. But are there other places where men or people have conflict in taking care of their children?
Well, let me just go back to the Family Care Act. It's too little, too late. And actually, the United States, among all of the developed countries, is the least supportive in their policies towards mothers and fathers taking time away from work, paid time away from work, to care for their young children. We lived in Czechoslovakia when we worked on a project for the United Nations. And in Czechoslovakia, women got 3 years of paid maternity leave.
Get out.
Yep.
Get out.
Right. If they were working, their job was held for 3 years for them. And they got paid during that time. They got 90% of their salary the first year. Then I think it dropped to 80 and then 75 the third year. But we also noticed that the family planning, most of the children were spaced at least 3 years apart. So they learned how to play the system a little bit. But that's not bad, because spacing your children 3 years apart is a very effective way of family planning, because that means every child gets at least 3 years of full attention, and they don't have to compete for that with other siblings who are maybe a year older or a year or two older. So it's a very good plan. And I know when we when we were over there, we were asked to go out and speak to various groups. And the theme of our talk always was, well, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't change these policies because the West doesn't have these. Because after communism fell, this was just after communism fell, and there was this rush to try to adopt everything Western and to do away with everything that they had before. I said, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Keep this policy because it's absolutely an important policy that most of the countries in the West don't have.
But I mean, at least we have something now. I mean, it might not be great, but at least it's something. It's
a little bit, and it's a little too late. And I mean, countries like Sweden have a year of paid not only maternity leave but paternity leave. Fathers can stay home from their job for a year and get paid. And I mean, that's the kind of support you really need to create this kind of equal parenting that we have, or this model of equal parenting that we're talking about with the male mother. So we're far short of where we should be in terms of family policy, family planning, and we have a long way to go yet. And I think if we could look at some of these other countries and what they're doing and how this is affecting their children, giving them the secure foundation they need to grow up and be responsible citizens, I think maybe we can learn something there.
Or if you have men tap more into their male mothers, then they would be empathic into the need of the man being there. I mean, because if you think about it, who's making the rules? The men.
The men, right? Yeah. People said if we had actually, if we even had the proportion of women in Congress that we have in our population, the rules would be different. They wouldn't make the kind of laws that they are now making. And in fact, interestingly, when we were in Czechoslovakia, this was another progressive idea that the West has not adopted. They had a cabinet level person whose job was to make sure that no laws were passed by the legislature that would have any adverse effect on families. Can you imagine that?
I mean, that's kind of hard to like even wrap your mind around,
isn't it? Yeah, but that was absolutely essential, and that person's job was to review every piece of legislation that was being proposed, and then to make recommendations about if it needed to be changed so it wasn't adversely affecting families in any way.
Wow. You know, I heard this one joke, and I'm sure it went around, you know, if men could get pregnant, you know, then abortion would be a sacrament.
Yeah, right. That's probably true.
Well, you know, but I think when it comes to family and child rearing, you know, because they don't do that job, you know, they just push it away, you know, and they just step outside that role.
I want to say one more thing that was interesting to me when I started writing this book. I was going to do some research, so I sent out an email to 53 fathers that I knew, and I said, if you're interested in helping me, answer these 3 questions and send me your responses. Email me back your responses. The 3 questions were, what did you do as a father when your kids were young that you really are proud of and you think really worked very well in helping the children? Are you there?
Yeah, I just dropped something.
Okay. And then the second question was, and what did you do that didn't work? That as you look at it now, you say, well, that one didn't work as well. And then the third question was, if you had to do over again, if you had a mulligan, what would you do differently? And so I sent these out. I thought they would be pretty easy for fathers to answer. And out of the 53, they all said yes, they would fill out the questions. Only 7 of them were capable of filling them out and sending them back. So I started following up with some of these people. Actually, some of them followed up with me. I sent them a second email saying, I haven't gotten your response yet. What's going on? I got a phone call from a couple of them. One father was in tears. He was sobbing. He said, this has brought up so much for me. I can't answer your questions. I just can't do it. I feel so much guilt and shame about what I didn't do and what I should have done,
Wow.
that I can't do it. So only 7 of the 53 who agreed to do it were able to fill out those questions and send them back to me. I was amazed at that, which showed to me how many fathers are carrying around a lot of guilt and shame about not doing a good job of raising their kids. And I'm saying to fathers, please forgive yourself. Nobody's perfect at this. You have to cut yourself some slack. As I said earlier, if you don't, your kids are going to have more of a relationship with your guilt and shame than they will with you. And do you want that? No, most fathers don't.
No, I mean, I think they want the best for their children, even though they don't know how to provide it.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, well, we're running out of, actually, we're pretty much out of time. Do you have any closing comments that you would make to encourage our male listeners, our potentially new male mothers, into taking the next step in working on themselves?
Well, I think the young males, and most of them have gotten it. They know that this is important, and they're taking steps to try to be equal parents. Obviously, sometimes because they grew up in a society that didn't emphasize learning these male mother skills, they're going to have some skills to learn. It's like learning any new job. So the book provides that information for them. Here are the skills you need to learn, and here's how to learn them. The second thing is, even if your children are older, it's never too late to provide this support for them. I mean, as a grandfather now, I'm still giving support to my kids and my grandkids that use my male mother skills. So you're never going to be anything but a father if you have children, and so you're always going to be a father, no matter how old your children are. And there's always opportunities at any age to provide them with the support they need to develop the things that they didn't maybe learn early on because you didn't have the skills.
Excellent. And if somebody wants to get a copy of your book, The Male Mother, The Missing Skill Set for Fathers?
Well, it's available at Amazon in 2 forms. It's available as an ebook for almost nothing. I think it's $4.
Dang.
And then it's also available as a print-on-demand book from Amazon, from CreateSpace, and it's a little bit more. I think it's $15. So if you want a book in your hand, you pay $15. If you have a Kindle or a device where you can do an ebook, you can buy it for a lot less and read it there. But I encourage you, if you're a young father or if you're a grandfather or a father of children of any age, that you can learn something from this that will help your children.
Excellent. Barry, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming on
Well,
again.
Thank you. And actually, this is the first book of a series of 4. So I might ask you to come on again when I start talking about the other books.
Well, I love talking to you. It's always a great conversation. And everybody learned something. The male mother. Who'd have thought?
Yeah. Well, actually, I actually that title is a bit provocative, and I kept it there for that reason. I think it would create some interest and curiosity. So I
think it works.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Barry, I need to let you go because the music is going to be coming up. Okay?
Thank you again.
All right. Thank you. All right. Bye, Barry.
Bye-bye, Rita.
That's Barry Weinhold. His book is The Male Mother, The Missing Skill Set for Fathers. And we'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.